Hello, how you doing? And thanks very much for tuning in to this week's video. Okay, so continuing the theme of what we've been talking about over the past few weeks, this session is all about staying focused on positive outcomes. Okay, and this is quite key because we can quite often have a more of a negative default and put ourselves under pressure, focus more on what we're not doing than what we are doing, and that can actually have an impact. So this is hopefully going to give you some tools and some techniques to actually change that. All right. But just as a bit of a recap, just to put this into context of the sort of bigger conversation that we've been having over the past few weeks, we've talked about setting goals. We've talked about getting really clear on why those goals are important to you. And even really visualizing what that means to us. So rather than us just thinking in quite a small way about what we want, actually starting to bring it to life by imagining ourselves at an event or a sort of an occasion somewhere down the line where we're really going to feel differently about ourselves because of the changes that we've made. And that can really make things feel have a stronger emotional connection to what we want and actually start to see why it's worth it in a much more powerful way. Then we talked about how we have to be really clear about what we actually do to make those things happen. The routines and the habits that we need to set up. We talked about scaffolding, the idea that we have to have these systems and processes in place that make it easier for us to do the things that we know make a difference. And we've talked about allowing ourselves to do those things that will make a difference because quite often there can be some resistance. We can hold ourselves back. So we need to be aware of that and know what we have to do to get past that. Okay, so that's what we've talked about over the past couple of weeks. This week, we're going to talk about how I want you to stay really focused on where you want to be and really positive about that rather than where you are today. Okay. Because what we want to be doing is avoiding the trap that we can actually fall into where we give more energy and focus to what we're not doing than what we are doing, to where we are now. It's interesting, isn't it? Because we're trying to change our health, our fitness, our weight. But today, we're not the person we want to be, the person we're working towards. But actually, just being overly focused on what we're not doing or where we are now can actually really hold you back and really sabotage your progress. So that's what we're going to flip. And I'm going to give you a process to do that as well. Um, Now, this it's something that we do anyway. We'll have done with other things in our lives. And I think this can be really powerful to be aware of that because we might be in a process to reaching a weight, reaching a fitness level that we've either never been before, or maybe we haven't been for a long time, or at the back of our mind, we think, oh, can I get to where I need to be now because I'm too old? I've not got enough estrogen, or whatever else, whatever other limiting beliefs we put on ourselves. I haven't got time. My life's too busy. My life's too stressful, etc. And we sort of can't quite believe that we can make this change that we want to make. And this is the gap that we're going to be bridging today. And it's quite interesting because when I speak, there's not a single person on this group now or that I've ever worked with who hasn't achieved something magnificent in their life and more than one thing. And we've only ever done that because of our sheer will and determination. And it's quite interesting that we can do it very regularly for areas outside of ourselves. But when it comes to doing something quite remarkable with our own health transformations, we can't apply those same principles. So, what I want you to do just to start off with is just think about something that you've achieved in the past that's been hard. Okay. I know I've done this before, but I'm going to do it again because it just really illustrates the point. And that could be buying a house, getting a job, getting a promotion, getting a qualification, even if you think about getting married. That's something that's a big, long, complex, expensive project, in most cases. And when we think about what we want in all of these scenarios, when we've got that first house or moved house or had an extension, whatever it is, we really think about how we're going to get there. We make a decision, we decide it's definitely going to happen, there's a commitment. And when we hit a roadblock or an obstacle, because there's always one, there's always something, we don't let that stop us. We just work out how to get around it and we keep going because we're so determined to get that thing. And, we really use our imaginations in that process as well. We imagine ourselves in the new house. We imagine ourselves with the more money that the promotion will bring, or when the extension is done, or whatever it. And we really do imagine ourselves in these positions. That keeps us going because we can visualize something. We really start to believe in that end result and we know it's possible. Whereas if there's something that we haven't achieved in our lives, if you look at something that you've, how can I put this? That you've either not achieved or that's not worked out how you wanted it to, then it's likely there will have been some doubt somewhere that we've not believed it's possible, or we've been more focused about how hard something is. We've been really tuned into the setbacks more than the progress or the positive things, and we can then start to get to a point where we eventually talk ourselves out of something and then give up, And when I was trying to think about where I've done this in the past, because I've done it with jobs. And I had a job a few years ago, quite a few years ago. And I remember that, again, I went there full of excitement, loved this company, loved the job, saw this huge opportunity and this career progression for me that I was really excited about. And over time, I started to get more focused on the things that annoyed me or the people that were sort of blocking the progress that I wanted to make or stopping me. And then I've started getting really negative about the job and the process. And, you sort of start to count the negatives. And in the end, no surprise, I left. I left that job. And, it's interesting because whilst I was going through a process that took me a few months to really sort of fall out of love with something and talk myself into being able to leave it. And, this is part of our careers. So it's not negative. I know a few people change jobs. And that's not to say we can't change jobs. It's more interesting how we start to talk ourselves out of something because we want to go into something else. Um, and, whilst I was going through this period of, hating everything about this company, there were people working alongside me in at a similar level, in the same environment, with the same management team, the same pressures, the same cultures, who were really thriving. Okay. And just using that as an example to see how different we can be in situations when we have a different future vision of what I didn't see my career being in this place at the end of the day. And that's probably why I'm here today, but why I would have done that. But you can see how that correlates with things that we can't believe or don't think are right for us versus things that we do want and we do believe we can have. When there's one situation we are determined, positive, we imagine it, we work really hard in our minds, first and foremost, to get there. When we can't quite believe or see something happening or being right for us, we start to then turn that into a very negative thing until we stop or change direction. Okay. So, this is something that we have to apply now, or these principles to our health and fitness goals, and we'll all have goals of different types, and some short term, medium term, long term. It doesn't matter. But let's have a think about some of these questions here. And if you want to stop and write down anything while you're watching this video, you can. But firstly, how strongly do we believe we'll get to where we want to be? That's really important. That belief, we've got to believe that that's possible for us. Sorry, I'm just turning my phone off. I just paused it to turn my phone off. So, how strongly do we believe that we'll get to where we want to be? And that's important. That's really important. Second one is, do we or can we imagine what that goal feels like? And how often do we actually let ourselves think about that and remind ourselves of that? Remember something else that you've wanted. You probably think about it all the time. How often are you imagine yourself being fitter, stronger, slimmer, whatever it would be? How often are you imagining that positive outcome? And another one, how often are we focused on the struggle or the setbacks? Do we see more of those and more of the difficulty than the positive progress that we're making? How often are we telling ourselves how hard it feels? What's the little voice? What's our little mental narrative about things? How tough it is, how hard it is, how hard we find it, how much effort we're making as in all negative things. And how often do we hear that little voice saying that we can't do something, we're not going to get there, and sort of planting those seeds of doubt about what we are working towards? Or do we very much focus on where we are today? Do we look at what we are now in terms of our health, our fitness, our weight, and see that as evidence that we're not going to try it, we're not trying hard enough, we're not going to get there, it's too big a change, it's too difficult, it's not possible? Or maybe think, oh, why am I doing all this and not getting anywhere? It's very easy for us to have these little thoughts and not really notice they're there, or to be missing some of the positive thoughts that we really need. And this is what we're trying to do today, to put this, to redress the balance so that there's more positivity than negativity, a lot more. And it's very easy for us to put ourselves under, or feel when we're doing this, we're putting ourselves under a huge amount of pressure on a day-to-day or even an hourly basis to try harder and do more and eat less or eat healthier or exercise more, or if we're not do it later. So there's lots of noise and lots of thought, and we can be trying very hard with this program for our health and putting a lot of pressure on ourselves, but that's actually creating quite a negative experience. And if the balance of the experience that we're creating around this feels negative, then we're not going to make the progress that we want. And that's what we want to change today, is really to be aware of that mindset, that positive or negative perspective, and look at how we start to move things around so the negative becomes a lot smaller and we really focus on the positive, because that's going to be the thing that helps us to make the progress and hit our goals. So this is an exercise or a process that we can go through, that we'll go through together. It's all about positively reframing what you're doing to hit your goals. And it's really about putting you in a much more positive mindset in general, getting more focused on in being able to achieve your goals and the belief that you can and you will. And then we're going to be looking at how we start to stack up all those positive changes that we're making. So we're crowding out the negative, critical, self-doubting voices that we often have. And the best thing is to do this regularly, little and often, like maybe 5 or 10 minutes a day, just to reflect. But there's basically 3 steps, okay? And some of them will be quick because we've done it before. And again, you can stop this video when you want to. So our first one is to write down our goals and why it's important to us. So we have talked about that before on some of these sessions that we've done over this year. But the second step, which we haven't done, is this. And it's why you believe you can make this happen. And that's a really important part. So that's the new bit that we're adding in today. And the next new thing that we're adding in today is the third step, which is keeping a record of all the positive things that we do in order on an ongoing basis to make that happen. So like keeping a record on your phone. So I'm just going to use myself as a little bit of an example for this. So my goal would be wanting to be, I'm writing it, I'm reading it here. You can tell I'm reading it, can't you? But it's being lean, strong, able to run well enough and cycle well enough to do events and races with Tim. And, that's important to me because they're memorable experiences. They make me feel excited. They help me keep feeling confident that I can keep doing that. And the why that's important to me, when we think about this, we have to use very positive words, so positive framing around that, not using negatives like because I don't want something. Because whether we're speaking out loud, whether we're writing, whether we're thinking this to ourselves, we know that our brains don't recognize the word don't. So that classic one, don't think about pink elephants, and you think about pink elephants. or you know yourself when if you're talking to a child or if you're talking to a person, it's much more effective. If you want to influence somebody, it's much more effective to tell them what you want them to do rather than what you don't want them to do. So, and I use this with Lucia a lot. Glad she's not in the house while I'm saying this. But when she was younger, um, you don't say don't make a mess or don't do that or don't run into the road. You'd say stay on the pavement. Let's keep things nice and tidy. Let's be good. So you're saying what you do want them to do because the brain doesn't hear the negative. And that's the same with an adult. You might, whether it's work, whether it's an older child, you wouldn't say, if you say don't speak to me like that, that's not going to get the result. Whereas let's speak to each other in a nice, respectful way is different. And in the workplace, you can probably think of examples, rather than saying don't do something, it's more effective to say what you do want somebody to do in terms of how they interpret that and how it lands. So it's the same thing with ourselves. So when we think of our goals and that language that we use in how we're thinking and speaking, for me to say I don't want to feel old and achy, or I don't want to be the weight I am now, or I don't want to look like this in my clothes, or I don't want to feel tired all the time, then I'm actually focusing on the negative. I'm focusing on what I don't want. So my brain starts to notice more about the things that I don't want, how achy I feel when clothes are tight, how heavy I might be when I stand on the scales. They're negative things. So we want to flip it. We want to start thinking of the positive things that we want. Like, I want to feel good in my skin. I want to have good energy every day. I want to do exciting things at weekends and on holidays. I want the confidence to sign up for more things like this. So we're going away from talking about our goals in the context of what we don't want and starting to think about what we do want. And the more things that we can think of, the better, because that adds up and makes it more powerful and more appealing to us. Okay. Then, so we're looking at the positive framing of what we want in our goals. Then we have to start to think about the second step is why you believe you can make this happen. Because having faith in ourselves is so important. So that turns it from, oh God, I wish I was I wish I was a stone lighter and fitter, to actually, and that's almost like a pipe dream that will never happen. We want to turn that into a belief that that is possible for you. Okay. So why do you believe you can make this happen? Whatever your goal is. So for me, I would say I can make this happen because I have the knowledge that I need about what I can do to make that happen. I understand nutrition, I understand exercises, the right exercise to do. Another one would be because I have set up the systems and other things that I need to motivate me and keep me accountable. That's the scaffolding that we've talked about. So I have done that. I know what that is. I have set them in place and I keep them going because I want to set a good example to my kids. Especially Lucia, and that's just because Tim's got two sons, and it's more recognizing, I want her to see, because one day she'll be my age and go through menopause, and I want her to feel or know that her mum had just knew how she needed to look after herself and went on to just not be held back by that in any way, so that she can do the same thing too. And we want our children to see that, and I know that can be a really powerful motivator for us all. Also, for me, I want to use this experience to help my clients. I want to help you. If I'm not doing this, how can I help you? So for me to do this, go through this process myself, the reason I can believe this, I can make this happen, a really powerful motivator for me is to go through that process myself and then share it with you and help you. And other things, other beliefs about why I can do something might go to my personal characteristics, because I'm quite a determined person and I'm happy to work hard at things and also I enjoy the process. And then just recognizing maybe the emotional aspect of it. These when I do these things, they make me feel good. I've started to notice over time that if I spent a whole weekend lying around watching TV on the sofa, I wouldn't feel great. I mean, there's time and a place for that. But that's not what I want my regular weekends to look like. If I sat there ordering pizza and eating junk food, which I love, but I feel terrible after, then I don't feel good. So I know the things that make me feel good on the inside, and I want more of those. And another one as well is really recognizing, one of the reasons I believe that I can make this happen now is because I'm at a stage in my life where I feel quite empowered to make these choices for myself. It feels easier. It feels like there's less barriers now. I more know what I want. I don't have very young children to take care of anymore, and I really enjoy this whole thing about me, just doing things for me. And that's just my list, but it's working out why you believe you can make this happen, the knowledge you've got, the emotional connection to it, what it says about your personality and your personal values, about what you believe in and how it applies to it. So having a list about those beliefs about why you can make something happen is really important. And then the last step, which is quite simple, is just keeping a track of all the positives. And a nice way to do this is to just keep a little, on your phone, on your notes, just now and again, you might just tap out a few things that you've done that are positive. And that can be something that you do, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or just now and again when you notice something, but keep a little tally. And that's keeping a little record of anything and everything that makes you feel better about what you're doing and your progress. And you might not need to do this forever. You've got a life, you've got other things to do. But the point is, it can really be quite powerful to help you out of, um, maybe at this help you out of a time where you aren't feeling like you're making progress, or you're feeling a little bit negative, or you're finding things a struggle. It can be something that really powerfully starts to turn you around and get your mind focused on the positives. So things that you might keep a record of, and I do this. You know, I've made good lunches this week. I'm noticing my mood and energy is higher now. The days are getting longer. I've done a workout, or I've not done a workout because I listened to my body and I needed a rest more than a workout. And I'm pleased that I can tell the difference between when I need to rest and when I'm just being lazy and not motivated. I'm not snacking as much as I used to. I'm thinking more positively about my process, about my progress. I made a meal, this is true. I made a meal for the family that was based on the sort of my ideal meals, and they all really loved it. So I'll be doing that more often. I noticed another true one when I was feeling a little bit stressed and tired yesterday and just grinding to a halt. I let myself go and lie down for half an hour, and I felt so much better after. At the weekend, I was feeling a bit overwhelmed with the housework. I asked for some help and got it, felt good about that. And, I've got more energy. Walking upstairs feels easier. You know, all these little things are about collecting evidence that you're making progress, taking small steps to change, changing your mindset, noticing how much better you are feeling in yourself. And it's turning the tide on the way you think. Now, I did mention about how much time you have and you've got a life. You don't have to be doing this all day. And I think a good way to do it is to just set aside a little bit of time on a regular basis when you can reflect. I like the morning. Some people might like the evening. Sometimes if I feel my mood dipping in the middle of the day and I get a bit tired and a bit overwhelmed, like my brain's slowing down, getting my little journal out might be quite good then, or tapping a few positive things. Well, how many good things can I think of on my phone can be really quite effective. Um, and I don't want to make it seem that you have to sort of overthink or be forcing these constant thoughts. Because it's about the balance, isn't it? You can't spend all day looking for positive things and searching for that positivity. But something that is quite useful is to start to pay attention to how you feel instead, because when you feel good emotionally, you know you're doing the right things. But when you feel bad emotionally or stressed or under pressure or your mood's down, you're not doing the right things. And that's not just to do with food and exercise, that's to do with rest and recovery. Okay. So it's really about becoming more aware of that, becoming more tuned into it, trying to gently remind yourself when you're noticing that you're struggling that you just need to remind yourself and shift your thinking back to something that's more positive. Take a break. You might need to take a break. reset that sort of positive thought train, and then you're good to go and carry on. So hopefully this has given you a little bit of extra, sort of a nice tool, really, I think, to keep your brain and to keep that positive mindset, believing in what's possible, and really trying to change that balance about how you think. Um, it all comes down to the bigger picture that we're working on is prioritizing ourselves, our health, our well-being, our happiness. When we're healthy, when we're looking after ourselves properly, we do feel happier. We can get more done. It's a very satisfying place to be. When we're neglecting ourselves and we're tired and we're struggling, it's not a good place to be. So this is what we're doing. We're trying to learn how to prioritize ourselves. And to do that, we have to be clear about what we want and what our goals are, and allow ourselves to have these lovely projects that are just about us, being in the best place we possibly can, and allowing ourselves to actually do it, which is a great feeling. We're always going to have lots of pressures around us, but it's a wonderful feeling to be able to carve the right amount of time for us to do the things that are important for us as well. And we can only do that when we believe we can. And we have to be enjoying that process, noticing all the benefits that come with it. And that's what this has been about today, that belief, enjoyment, enjoying the process, seeing the change to create this really positive mindset that the work that we're doing is worth it and we're getting results, and that's going to keep us motivated to keep going. Okay, so I hope that's been useful. I hope that's given you something extra, and I hope it's shown you the importance and how to go from the negative self-talk and giving yourself a hard time and flipping that towards the opposite, which is the positive, and seeing those positives. And if you do this, it is really powerful. It can make a very big difference quite quickly, actually. And it's a good way to get yourself out of a slump, out of a tired period, bring that into your sort of hitting the reset button process. If you find that you've just had a period of work where you're tired, or your mind's been on something else, it can be something that's really powerful to then get you really fired up and noticing the positive things again to sort of speed up your process and set you off back in the right direction. Okay. As always, if you want to talk about any of this in our one-to-ones, then you can do. Love to hear any comments, any feedback from this in terms of how useful you find it. That's always helpful for me, and it's also always nice for me to know as well. So enjoy the rest of your day, and I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Bye for now.